Hello, welcome to Pierside here on Sparks 1524. I'm Nathaniel Miller. Informally known as the Ditch, the Suez Canal is one of the most vital links in the world's shipping. This one canal allows vessels to shave multiple days, sometimes even weeks, as well as thousands of miles off their journeys. Transiting the canal is not just to see a magnificent engineering marvel, but it's also to pass through ancient lands that have affected and influenced cultures around the world. Passing through the Suez Canal is always an event, especially when it's your first time. I joined the Navy on September 16th, 1997 because I wanted to serve the nation. I wanted to have the adventure of being in the Navy and I wanted to see the world. It's like the old recruiting poster back in the day. Join the Navy, see the world. My first deployment was a Westpac or Western Pacific deployment. And Westpac 0102 took me from San Diego across the Pacific into the Arabian Sea. And then we turned around and came back. So for Westpac 2001, 2002, I went halfway around the world, literally halfway, and then came home. It would be about another 10 years before I finally completed circumnavigating the globe, only I would finish it not by going in a full circle. I would go the opposite way and meet in the middle where I had stopped 10 years before. So I have been literally around the world. I just did this and then this. And this is part of the story of where I got to sail through the Suez Canal. I reported aboard the amphibious transport dock USS Ponce, LPD-15, in July of 2010, just about 5 days before a 9-month deployment. I was the new guy. There were 3 events, the early part of that deployment, that really kind of welded me into the crew, if you will. The first was the work that my shipmates saw me doing as we got underway to start that deployment. That day was literally the first day most of them even knew I was on board. The second big event in which I was able to build my credibility was our passage through the Strait of Gibraltar. The third event, and the final one that really broke down all the final barriers between me and my shipmates, was our passage through the Suez Canal. Most of the reticence to work with me and kind of let me in, if you will, stemmed from a lack of experience with mass communication specialists and the scope of work that we do. Let's be honest, if you're working in the engine room and you're sweaty and dirty and some guy with a camera in a generally neat uniform comes down, your first thought, if you don't actually know him, is that, great, another one of those nerds with a camera going to take a few pictures and run back up to the air conditioning. If you're on the forecastle as part of the deck department, you're covered in grease and grime, you've been needle gunning rust all day, you're painting. Here comes this guy out of the air-conditioned spaces of the ship, camera in hand, bright and chipper expression, same thing. Great, camera nerd, terrific. I was determined to overcome that, and I started that when we went underway, and I continued that work ethic going past the Strait of Gibraltar. But it was the Suez Canal, when I showed up on the forecastle at 03:30 in the morning, that was the final piece to the puzzle. This was the event that showed them, I am a sailor. I'm going to get up and I'm going to do the long hours and I'll be on deck with them because I'm part of them. This is my ship. I'm going to support it. What made it even cooler was that this final piece of the puzzle, to me, truly becoming part of the crew of Ponce, coincided with yet another childhood dream, sailing through the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal was not a new idea. The ancient Egyptians dug canals to create waterways and facilitate trade around the area. The effort to build a modern maritime highway began in 1830, but the canal would take nearly 40 years to complete. Opening in 1869, the Suez Canal stretches for 120 miles, about 193 kilometers, and remains a vital link between the Mediterranean and the Red Seas. Originally a one-lane highway, convoys would have to anchor in the Great Bitter Lake to allow convoys heading the opposite direction to pass. Egypt significantly expanded the canal in 2015 by creating a partial second lane. This helped speed north and southbound convoys, decreasing transit time by up to 18 hours. The Suez Canal is an engineering masterpiece located in a somewhat volatile part of the world. To protect the traffic flow, the Egyptian government maintains a tight cordon of security around the canal. so guard posts and military patrols are a regular part of the landscape. Ships gather into convoys, with the southbound convoys starting the transit about half an hour before northbound convoys get underway. To make the transit safely, ships take on a pilot. Sailing through a narrow waterway isn't just a matter of keeping your rudder straight. Wind loading can push a vessel off course, and the bigger the ship with more surface area for the wind to hit, the greater the effect the wind has. Additionally, the water flowing between the ship's hull and the canal banks has to flow faster than the water ahead of or behind the ship. This results in less water pressure between the ship and canal walls. If a ship gets off course, this bank effect can literally suck a ship into the canal banks, grounding it hard. These two factors caused the grounding of the massive MV Ever Given in 2021, blocking the canal for 6 days because the ship got stuck south of the new 2-lane sections. The canal bristles with aids to navigation, providing transiting ships with everything from range points to day marks in order to accident-proof their travel as much as possible, and canal pilots are a key part of this. However, the ship's captain is ultimately responsible for the safety of their vessel, but the pilots provide a wealth of knowledge and experience for the captain to rely on. Now, ships anchor in the Great Bitter Lake to allow other convoys to pass. It's a very tightly orchestrated traffic flow through the canal. Depending on the time of year, anchoring in the Great Bitter Lake can be a scorching experience or a freezing experience. When we went through in September of 2010, it was the scorching variety. I was on deck since 0330. Yes, public affairs are important, but also, as I've said before on this channel, if something went wrong, something happened, I had to create a visual record. So I was up there all day, but let's be honest. Yes, I'm up all day and I'm running around a ship in the Middle East, but I'm the lucky one. I get to go back inside if I want. I can duck into the bridge and cool down. If there were any real heroes aboard Ponce while transiting the canal, it's the deck and security forces standing in the sun all day watching our backs, and the snipes broiling in the engineering spaces below, ensuring the Proud Lion maintained power and maneuverability. The first major landmark the Proud Lion saw as dawn approached was the Suez Canal Bridge, also known as the Friendship Bridge. Built with the assistance of the Japanese government in 1995, the bridge links mainland Egypt to the Sinai Peninsula. However, the bridge also quite literally links two continents, Africa and Asia. A little further down, the El Ferndon Railway Bridge dates back to 1918, with the current structure having been completed in 2001. A swing-span bridge, the two halves of the crossing provide yet another dramatic point breaking the monotony of the desert horizon. One of the more impressive sights is the 1918 Suez Canal Defense Monument. This structure, built with twin obelisks, was erected to commemorate the successful defense of the Suez from the Ottoman Empire during World War I. It's probably one of the most photographed sites along the canal, not the least of which is because of its dramatic rise from the desert sand into the sky. The Proud Lion transited back north through the canal on March 2nd, 2011. This was a very different day. This was not the scorcher, this was more of the chiller, if you will. Being March, it was a lot cooler. Actually, in fact, in the early morning hours, it was downright cold. But as the sun came up and the day and the daylight hours took over, the air was much more mild. Because it was so much cooler, there wasn't nearly as much haze in the air. So this time the colors around us really popped. The other ships around us were almost gay in their colors, including this one cruise ship that was pretty neat to look at. The colors of the monuments along the canal just were so much more vibrant. It was a gorgeous day. Now, if you think that going through the canal on a smaller ship like the USS Ponce makes the canal feel narrow, try going through it on an aircraft carrier. Aboard a ship like the Ponce, you stand in the center line of the ship on the forecastle and look either way. You see water, and then you see the banks. You stand on the center line of an aircraft carrier transiting the canal. You look on either side of the flight deck, and you don't see no water. You just see flight deck and land. My last two transits were aboard the aircraft carrier USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, CVN 69. Now, I wasn't attached to the ship, I was attached to the Navy Public Affairs Support Element East, or NPACE East. NPACE puts sailors, media sailors, mass communication specialists, and public affairs officers on the large decks, like carriers and large deck amphibious assault ships, to bring their media centers up to full strength during deployment. NPACE also puts MCs, mass communication specialists, on the smaller decks to give them a public affairs presence during deployment. So my last two transits through the canal, I was the leading petty officer of NPACE East Detachment, or DET, aboard the Ike. This time around, it was my junior sailor's turn to do all the cool footage. That means, however, that all the footage I took this time through these two transits belonged to me. I was just one of the tourists up on the deck as we transited through. Ike's passage south was on July 18th, 2012. The day started out way foggy. The Friendship Bridge loomed over us like a ghost, pretty much appearing at the last minute. The day did clear later on, however, allowing us to enjoy the sights on our way down to the Red Sea. I did spend time on the deck coaching my sailors, but I have to admit most of my time on deck this time around was simply getting a chance to look around and enjoy the view. Ike and her strike group transited back north through the canal on December 1st of 2012. On Ponce, when we transited north, we were on the tail end of our deployment, but we still had a little bit to go. When I transited through on the Ike, we were leaving our deployment. We transited through the canal, shot straight through the Mediterranean, through the Straits of Gibraltar, across the Atlantic back home. So this transit north marked effectively the end of the operational part of the deployment, and therefore there was a very festive air aboard ship as we went north. We were going home. It was an early Christmas present. Of course, we were also enjoying the fact it was rather warm because in just a couple of weeks we were going to be in Virginia in December. One thing that really struck me about transiting the canal on the Ike is just the unreality of watching things move past you. When you transit through the canal on a smaller ship like Ponce, there is a sense of you doing the moving. You can see the water on either side of the hull, you can see the canal banks. You have a sense that your ship is the one moving. You transit through a canal like that on an aircraft carrier, a ship of that kind of size, there is a very unreal feeling that you're standing still and the entire world is moving around you. The Friendship Bridge, for example, there is no sensation that the Ike was moving as we passed under the Friendship Bridge, either going or coming. It looks like this giant bridge is moving and we're standing still. It was the oddest feeling, but it was a good feeling, especially since we were going home. Passing through the Suez Canal was a dream come true for me. There is a unofficial society in the Navy called the Order of the Ditch. It's those of us who transited the Suez Canal. The Ponce didn't give out certificates or anything when we went through, but the Ike did. And I've got mine framed on the wall. I just put a little notation on it to note that my first transit was actually back in 2010 aboard Ponce, but I still have it proudly on the wall next to my shellback certificate from 2002, excuse me. Passing through the Suez wasn't just a childhood dream come true, however. It was the final moment in which I earned my credibility with my shipmates aboard Ponce. Prior to the Suez, most of them were still meeting me, and most of them were surprised to see me on deck when something went down, much less on deck with them all day during the event. After our first transit through the Suez, the only thing that would surprise my shipmates is if I didn't show up. I actually ended up earning a second nickname aboard Ponce. I'd been Sparky Miller for years, and that's a story I'll tell you later. But I was seen around that ship with that camera so much my shipmates started calling me MC1 Paparazzi. The captain would sometimes have me paged over the 1MC, MC1 Paparazzi, report to the bridge. Through the Suez on the Ike wasn't quite as emotional because I didn't have the same stakes involved, and that time I was not the one taking the photos and video for release. I was there mentoring my junior sailors. But that in itself was pretty rewarding. I appreciate your time, and I hope you've enjoyed this passage through the Suez Canal. I certainly did when I got to do it for real. If you have enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Feel free to share this with anybody you think might be interested in it. If you like what I do here on Sparks 1524, hit that subscribe button so you can keep up with me as I produce new episodes. Until I see you again here on Sparks 1524, I hope you have a great day, have a good week, and remember, go do great things.